Hello there and welcome to the public edition of the weekly davidicke.com videocast. The subscriber edition, of course, is exclusive to subscribers of davidicke.com. That's separate. Go to davidicke.com for more details. This is the public edition. And David, this week, of course, is in Bratislava, Slovakia, where he's gearing up for this weekend's all-day talk. Good morning, mate.
Good morning, Richie. And
how are you?
It's kind of appropriate that we're talking from, or I'm talking from Bratislava, you're talking from Manchester, because one of the things that is a common theme as I've spoken around Europe and through the Balkans is the way that the countries of the former Soviet Union and the former Yugoslavia have been sucked in to this EU tyranny and the NATO tyranny in such a short time after gaining at last independence. And I want to talk this week about the EU and this blatant and gathering campaign that was always going to happen to destroy Brexit. Let's start with what the European Union is. It's a centralized tyranny that was planned way back, at least from the 1920s, in truth, long before that, to control the entirety of Europe with a few bureaucrats that ended up in Brussels. And those bureaucrats answer to the hidden hand that orchestrated the creation of the European Union and continue to push it in the direction of sucking in more and more countries and taking more and more power from sovereign states to the center, with the plan eventually, as I've been saying for years, of breaking up Europe into regions and bringing an end to the nation states. We'll talk about that a little bit later, given some things that are topically happening now. And so Brexit was an enormous shock to the system, because the idea is to go on absorbing more countries, not let any go. And just coming back to this European, Eastern European Balkans subject, this area of the world where I'm sitting now has gone through an entire history of occupation and dictatorship, whether it was the Romans, whether it was the Habsburg Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Nazis also took over a lot of this part of the world. And then, of course, the Soviet Union moved in and controlled this area. We had the former Yugoslavia as well. And then, after the fall of the Soviet Union, which was all orchestrated, this is the point that people miss. This agenda for the world has a time frame. They don't always keep to it, but if you go beyond the time frame and say it has a sequence where one thing leads to another, they try to keep to the time frame, but they want to keep to the sequence. Now, after the Second World War, or towards the end of it, we had the dropping of the bombs on Japan in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And that was to show the world the power of the nuclear age, of the atomic age. Because the next stage was to create the Cold War. Now, if you imagine, if you were trying to create massive fear between the Soviet bloc and the West on the basis of nuclear weapons, it's much easier to do that if you've got an example that people have seen, because then they see, actually, this is what happens when those things drop. And if you hadn't have done that in Japan, and of course the Japanese surrendered on the same terms they'd already offered before, then it would have been much more difficult, because it would have been a concept of what nuclear weapons do. It would not have been a blatant example for all to see. And so there was a period with what we call the Cold War, where enormous numbers of things happened because of the Cold War. They were justified by protecting the West from the Soviet Union protecting themselves from the West. And so you had this enormous arms buildup and this nuclear weapons buildup. But there was a point in this sequence where the idea was to suck in and absorb the countries of the former Soviet Union and Yugoslavia into the European Union and into NATO. And so after having this long list of Soviet leaders who all look like they've just come back from a funeral, perfect facial features and expressions to frighten the West with, and then along comes Mikhail Gorbachev, who's smiling, feely, and I'm a nice guy. Suddenly, the vehemently anti-Soviet Union Margaret Thatcher said, I can do business with this man. And suddenly, decisions were made by Gorbachev or reactions to movements to challenge the control of the Soviet Union were not acted upon or defended by Gorbachev. And suddenly the Soviet Union started unraveling. And this was all done on purpose. We had all the scenes, and I understand why, when the Berlin Wall came down and it seemed as if freedom had come, and it was all wonderful. But it was just part of a sequence, because control does not have to be in your face. Control does not have to be from inside a tank. It can be through people with dark suits and briefcases and reams of regulation, which is the European Union way of doing it. Well, at least up to this point. So the Soviet Union came down. And as I've gone through the Balkans and through this area of the world, the Czech Republic, Slovakia now, Slovenia, etc., there has been a very clear sequence. And that is that the Soviet Union, or the former Yugoslavia, came to an end. Then there was a period, after all these centuries of occupation of this area of the world, the Romans and the Habsburgs and the Nazis and the Soviets, and there was this period after the fall of the Soviet Union of countries making their decisions within their own borders. But so fast, these countries started to join both the EU and the NATO alliance. So take the example of Slovakia, where I am now. In 2004, just a short time, really, after the fall of the Soviet Union, just a matter of years, they joined both the EU and NATO, and in 2009 they joined the Euro, which is economic control, of course, from Brussels and the European Central Bank. And so the idea of the European Union has been to acquire and centrally control more and more and more countries in the European continent. And so Brexit was their worst nightmare. Of course, if you look back at the sequence, we only had a referendum by accident, by a series of events that were not foreseen by those that promised the referendum. First of all, why did David Cameron promise the referendum? Quite simply because the rise of UKIP concerned him in terms of losing votes and seats to them. So he offered a referendum to try to mitigate the impact on conservative votes of UKIP. He never thought that he would have to come up with it, because all the opinion polls were saying that it would be another coalition. And he knew that any coalition with the Liberal Democrats, who are European centralized fanatics to their DNA,
indeed,
would be blocked. So I'm in the clear, thought David Cameron. And then, against the odds, if we remember, he won a majority. Now he's stuck with it. He's promised it. He's got to come up with it. But even then, oh no, what we'll do is we'll tell the great unwashed, who we have made voiceless and ignored. And I'm not talking about just the Conservatives. I'm talking about the entire political class, including the Labour Party, most notably in many ways the Labour Party, have ignored vast tracts of society and made them voiceless. You want to vote for what you really want? Actually, there's no party that's actually standing for what you really want. So they thought we'll frighten them. We'll tell them that like the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, Osborne, we'll tell them that Godzilla will attack London on the morning after the vote, if we vote to come out, and all this. It'll be a catastrophe. Oh, I'll have to have an emergency budget. He didn't. And to their shock, people voted for Brexit. And this is one of the reasons why. Because the political class, in almost its entirety, had made great chunks of our society voiceless by not representing or articulating what they were concerned about, not least by following a politically correct agenda. It meant that they couldn't make a statement in an election involving voting for political parties. They had no vehicle to make a statement. And then along comes Brexit, which is a in or out question referendum. And at last, free of political parties getting in the way of obscuring the people's will, they had the chance at last to have a voice. And that is what people took the chance to do. And against all the odds and all the predictions, we had Brexit. Then, of course, it started, as I said it would start, within almost minutes of the referendum result, the attempt to block it. And that's what we're having now, Richie, on a gathering scale. This is one headline from this week. Brexit, government branded a shambles after David Davis U-turn on EU vote, saying that maybe we'll come out of the EU before Parliament gets a vote on it. Now, Parliament getting a vote on the deal agreed, the exit deal agreed with the EU, is simply code for this is our chance to stop it.
Absolutely.
That's what it is. That's why they want it. That's why they're insisting on a Parliament deciding. And I love it when they say, oh, Parliament must decide because it's a democracy. Parliament has given away its democracy minute by minute by minute to the European Union ever since we joined under paedophile Satanist Edward Heath. So the idea that these people that are trying to block Brexit, the usual suspects like Tony Blair, war criminal, like the guy Nick Clegg, former leader of the Liberal Democrats, who all but destroyed it as a parliamentary party.
Yeah.
All of them, again, EU to their DNA. I mean, that's where Clegg used to work. He used to be basically an aide to another paedophile who got away with it, Leon Britton. And so you look again at Peter Mandelson, who is the Bengali spinner of the Blair regime, he's also trying to block it. And so you go across the channel to Brussels, and you see all the bureaucrats in Brussels trying to block it and trying to do as much as they can to delay and block and ridicule and distort. And I was interested to note, Richie, this week, this guy, Donald Tusk, and he said,
the European Council President,
European Council President,
yeah.
He said the EU will be defeated in Brexit negotiations unless it maintains absolute unity. That's how they see it. It's a war. It's not the will of the British people is that they leave, so they must leave, and we must do it in an orderly way. No, to them, that would be a defeat. The whole idea is to win this war by stopping Brexit happening. And you've had Tony Blair this week, and anything Tony Blair wants is this hidden hand speaking, by the way. He's called for a second Brexit referendum. I nearly fell off my chair when I read that. I was shocked that he would have suggested it. And so then you turn to the current Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, and his extraordinary prevarication when you have a guy who, through his political career, has opposed the EU. And then when it came to the referendum, the Brexit vote, he prevaricated and, in theory, officially supported staying in the European Union. And then since the Brexit vote, he has again prevaricated. And he's going over, as he did recently in the last week or so, to Brussels to coincide meeting with Brussels officials about Brexit with Theresa May, the Prime Minister, going over there as part of the negotiation. Of course, the timing was not an accident. And he is attacking May and the government. And, you know, I have no brief for her and the Conservative Party, to say the least. But he's attacking her for upsetting the European bureaucrats. Well, they should be upset. They're trying to stop the will of the British people. What are you doing, Mr. Corbyn, siding with these bureaucrats? They're trying to block the will of the people. Of course they should be upset.
Absolutely
of course
right.
They should be challenged.
100% right.
And then he's saying that she should have already agreed to EU nationals staying in the UK. She'd already agreed, basically, that we stay in the single market. Well, hold on a second. I thought the word was negotiation. If you say, well, as he clearly would and is, that, no matter what, this is going to happen, no matter what, we're going to agree to this. Well, where's the negotiation? The EU bureaucrats are going to have him for breakfast, dinner and tea. And we're going to end up with either no Brexit or an apparent disconnection from the European Union that actually is meaningless, because all the things that people voted against would continue to happen.
What did you... I mean, we didn't speak about this. It was incredible to me that those who seemingly or claim to be in favour of a proper disconnection from the European Union, that they haven't made more of the fact that Keir Starmer and Jeremy Corbyn were in Brussels meeting with Tusk and Verhofstadt and Michel Barnier. And I talked about this on our show and said, how could it be acceptable or amenable even to the UK populace that the elected government of the day, loved them or loathed them, is doing a deal or attempting to do a deal to get out of the European Union, and the unelected opposition party, its chief protagonists are in Brussels talking with these people, as you just alluded to there, David, about actually keeping the UK in. That's a kind of treason, really, isn't it? It's not just treason, but it's endemically wrong It's empirically wrong for them to be there speaking with the European Union, who were obfuscating and trying to slow down talks and making it difficult for the elected government. It's a bizarre scenario, right? At the very least.
Well, I remember I was in Estonia speaking when Donald Trump was elected, the morning after the American election. And I did a video there which said that basically this is an expression of people crying for help, the voiceless. And of course, they voted for a man thinking he was standing for what he really said he was. But of course, as I said in that video at the time, that morning, those that voted for Trump are going to be very, very disappointed with what happens from here, because it was obvious he was a fraud. Now, when I look at Jeremy Corbyn, I see a fraud. I don't see someone who really believes in what he says. He might even think and persuade himself he does. But he's just going to be another politician. He is just another politician. It's not about, see, what we're looking for, surely, in politicians are those that don't play politics, ironically. Those that put the will of the people and the needs of the people and the benefits of the people first. And if that means supporting the party that you apparently oppose in certain areas for the benefit of the country, then that's what you do. That's real politicians that actually care about the outcome. What we're seeing with Jeremy Corbyn is like all professional politicians, they don't know any better, they can't help themselves, is just manipulating events for their own benefit in the act of seeking power for themselves as Prime Minister. And the more they can undermine Theresa May, a lady I have absolutely no time for whatsoever, by the way, then they see that as the best for them politically. That is frankly disgusting. And when you are faced with a vicious, merciless Brussels bureaucracy, a dictatorship in everything but name, and you go there cap in hand, trying to appease them, then you might as well not even bother being in politics, because they'll have you again for breakfast, dinner, and tea. And interestingly, Richie, while this has been going on this week, and people like Nick Clegg, I've noticed here in the story I'm just looking at here, Nick Clegg, he's actually got a new book out called How to Stop Brexit. I mean, can you imagine the arrogance it takes for someone who was such a disaster at the polls?
That's right.
To look at the will of the British people and then say, how do we stop the will of the British people? I mean, it's extraordinary. But then again, Clegg is a classic member of the political class. And whatever they may say, and whatever this momentum group may do to spin Jeremy Corbyn, he's a member of the political class. He's just on a different point on the postage stamp, that's all.
What do you think? What do you think? So what Brussels want, it would appear, is that May collapses and is replaced, or at least triggers a leadership contest in the Conservative Party. That might happen in the next 3 or 4 months, leading to a spring general election next year, which Corbyn might possibly win, or might win with another party, might go into coalition. It's interesting that a number of political commentators have lately been commenting on how much more prime ministerial Corbyn is looking in terms of the way he's dressing and the way he's speaking and the things he's doing and saying. Brussels would love that, wouldn't they? Because at that point they could say in the spring, well, we were negotiating with one party, with one government, they're gone, we've got another government in now, we'll have to start the whole process over again. That could be mooted at that particular point. Do you see that as a possibility in the next few months?
Absolutely. And prime ministerial, by the way, that's a code word for doing the system's bidding, doing the system's will. What we're looking at, Richie, is an alliance on both sides of the English Channel between the anti-Brexit political class in Britain and the anti-Brexit bureaucratic class in Brussels. That they're working together. some of it will be coordinated, and some of it will just be by the fact that they all want the same thing. Another story, but just very quickly, I want to do another aspect of this in a second, which a lot of people might not see the significance of. It's from the London Evening Standard this week. I saw this on my way out of Heathrow Airport earlier. Brexit wages squeeze, will it ever end? This is a front page story in the London Evening Standard. Again, the latest story trying to frighten people into changing their mind about Brexit because of the consequences. And what a lot of people might miss is that the London Evening Standard is being run in terms of editorially by George Osborne, who is who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, warning about Godzilla attacking London the next morning after Brexit. So wherever you look, these people are pushing and seeking to undermine the will of the British people, and they need to be called out on it. Now, Richie, this is the other aspect of this story this week, and which, while the attempts to block Brexit go on, the real agenda of the European Union, which is what I've been exposing in the books for like 30 years, is the fact that where we are in Europe, the Europe that Brexit voted to leave is not where it's meant to stay. And there is an agenda to push this further and further on. In terms of centralization of control. And here we have a story from the French president, Emmanuel Rothschild Macron, and his call to federalize Europe. Well, that's exactly been the plan since the 1920s at least. France's president, Emmanuel Macron, is calling for a radical restructuring of the whole EU. Macron has presented his map for the EU into 2024. He is proposing the Eurozone budget must include a joint force for military operations, something I've been saying was the plan since the 1990s. And Macron intends to finance this new budget with, wait for it, an EU tax, which has also been in the pipeline all along. And he is simply articulating the plan that his masters who put him into power have been orchestrating the EU towards from day one, indeed before day one. So if people think that the EU is bad now, so we need to get out, they should stick around and watch where it goes, because it's nowhere near as centralized in its power structure as it's designed to be. And as I mentioned earlier, Richie, the plan has been all along to end the nation state, the sovereign state, and replace it with regions. Now, what we're seeing here, of course, this is a story from this week, of course, a big running story about Catalan. Catalan in Spain wishes to have independence, and it's had its referendum. Another story on the same page, Italian regions vote on autonomy. Now, as I've said before, I'm a great believer in the devolution of power. I want decisions made over people's lives to be made by people affected by those decisions, because once you put vast distance between the people affected by decisions and the people making the decisions, those decisions will have no beneficial impact or relevance often to the people who are subjected to them. And I have just, of course, described the European Union. Absolutely. That's exactly what happens. These bureaucrats in Brussels that people all over Europe can't even name are making decisions about places they've never been and know nothing about. So I'm all for devolution of power. But if we're going to be streetwise, we need to appreciate why the European Union also wants people to divide into regions, because that's the plan all along. And I'll say this to these people who who want independence, whether it's Scotland, the SNP, or whether it's the Catalans, or whether it's Italy, wherever. If you want independence, that's fair enough. But if you plan on independence within the EU, you are kidding your frickin' self. There is no independence within the EU. What Macron is pushing, of course, which has been the plan, like I say, all along, is to impose even greater centralization of power upon the countries and eventually the regions of Europe. So you'll be anything but independent. You'll be less independent then than you are within Spain now.
Absolutely.
Or Italy now. Independence, fine, but outside the EU. And this is why this lady, Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, who's been pushing for Scottish independence, is totally misleading the Scottish people with her rhetoric when she talks about Scottish independence. There will be no Scottish independence within the EU. And this lady is actually, on one hand, calling for independence, and on the other, calling for Scotland not to be subject to the Brexit vote and thus stay in the European Union. I mean, talk about two sides of the brain not talking to each other. I mean, please. Talk about cognitive dissonance. You cannot be independent, whoever you are, within the EU. That's the whole point.
Well,
and of course, go ahead, Rich.
No, you have many, many listeners and followers in the Republic of Ireland, and they would echo what you're saying, because, some of the people listening to this podcast might not be aware, but the Irish fiscal budget, the annual budget where the Finance Minister of Ireland outlines spending plans, it's approved by a man called Wolfgang Schäuble, who's effectively the German finance minister. And the Germans deny this, of course, but it's the truth. The Troika, as they're called, meet with Irish officials 3, 4, 5 times a year and tell them what they can and what they can't do. The essence of what David is saying today, there's no independence within the European Union. None.
And the other aspect of that, we'll finish on this area, is I've got a big headline in front of me: EU flashpoints that make Brexit seem like a breeze. And the subheadline is, as an anti-immigration Eurosceptic billionaire is set to be the new Prime Minister of the Czech Republic, of course, just across the border from where I am now. This Oxford historian explains why voters across Europe are rejecting everything Brussels stands for. And it's looking at the rise of anti-EU and anti-unfettered immigration parties across Europe. And it mentions Germany, Poland, Hungary, Scandinavia, Netherlands, Austria, Italy, Czech Republic, Serbia, and France. I'm not sure about Serbia. I've been there and seen their government at close hand. But this is the great irony, you see. The Brexit pressure to stop Brexit is coming from the so-called progressives. The progressives who have been equated with liberal values and liberalism, when they're absolutely the opposite. They're the new tyranny, masquerading as open people that believe in diversity. They don't. They want to destroy diversity. It's the progressives that are pushing political correctness to the point of utter insanity. And these are the same progressives that go on marches about globalization and the effect of centralization of power, what we call globalization, on the poorest people of the world. And yet they then go on marches calling for us to stay in the EU. And the centralization of power in the EU is coming from the same hidden hand that is centralizing power through what we call globalization, economically, etc., and trade agreements. And then we have the progressives, and I would include, of course, people like the Liberal Democrats, the Democrats in America, the Labour Party, or great chunks of it these days, the Greens, and so on. And they are up in arms, as they are in the United States, they are in Europe, about the rise of the right. Oh, the rise of the right.
Yeah.
And populism. And populism, what's populism? Populism is people voting for what they want to happen. And what they can't see in their own self-purity is that they are the ones causing the rise of these parties. They're causing it. Why? Because, as I mentioned earlier, thanks to these politically correct, tyrannical imposers and censors, people are voiceless. What they are concerned about, what they want, what they fear is not being addressed. If they say something about immigration, however mild, they're a racist, they're a fascist, they're a Nazi. And something simply happens then. People either accept that situation, or political movements start to emerge that articulate those voiceless people's concerns. And what is then going to happen? Those people are going to gravitate towards those parties.
Of course.
And that is what is happening all over Europe. And for these arrogant progressives, clueless about the world, most of them, to complain about the rise of these so-called populist parties in Europe, and then to say it's someone else's fault, when they have created the very environment for which these parties have first emerged and then become subject to so much support. And as I've said, and I will go on saying, because it's so important, it's not the right that we should be concerned about, although, of course, that's not a good thing when you move into the realms of what is known as the far right. But I don't judge people by labels. He's a Nazi, he's a this, he's a that. I don't judge people by that. I don't judge people by what they say. I judge by what they do. And when you judge progressives and the progressive movement by what they do, they are the new fascism. They are the new tyranny. And they need to be, that needs to be highlighted, because at the moment, for many people, that's being hidden by their rhetoric. Oh, we're nice people, we are. We just want to stop you saying what we don't like. And if we don't address this, then this progressive tyranny is going to delete freedom of speech, and it's going to delete, ironically, given they go on about it so much, it's going to delete what we call democracy.
That was the public version. Excellent stuff, David, by the way. And I know there's a lot of that coming in your new book. That was the public version of the davidicke.com weekly videocast. Thanks for listening to it. For the full unedited version, do go to davidicke.com and subscribe there. It's about the price of a cup of coffee a month. It's well worth it. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Richie.